Hello. Hi, everyone. Hi, Jen. Hi, Loretta. Hey, Kristen. Hey, Abigail. Hey, Kira and Aisha. Hi, everyone. Let's do our opening, which is Katie, I have written down. And I see her. Well, I don't see her. I see her on the call. I don't see her. I know I see her. Hello. Okay, I'm going to unmute you. Oh, you're already unmuted yourself. 2 steps ahead of me. Perfect. All right, I'm going to mute and take it away when you're ready.
Okay, so if everyone could sit comfortably or lay down and begin to close your eyes. Take a full breath in through your nose and breathe out through your mouth at whatever rate feels good for you. As you exhale, start to imagine that smoke is coming out of your body. This smoke represents every thought that's negative, every stress that you want to let go of, and everything that isn't serving you. With each exhale, imagine that smoke is billowing around your body, your hair, around your face, and slowly finding its way towards the floor. Imagine that the smoke's now moving from your body along the floor of the room that you're in, out of your door, out of your windows, and away from the space you're sitting in. Imagine that now you're able to inhale smoke-free air full of positive energy and everything that you need to be telling yourself. All of the positive thoughts, all of the compliments that you deserve to give yourself. Imagine that the last of the smoke has left your room and is now dissolving into the air outside of your home or your apartment. As you start to return your attention back to your body, imagine that the smoke and all of the heaviness of all of the negative thoughts have completely left you, and that you are full of the cleanest air possible and feeling lighter than you were before. Breathe the clean air into any part of your body that's still stiff, and try to relax your shoulders and your neck. Continue to think of anything positive that you've needed to hear about yourself today as you breathe in that cleanest air and exhale the last little bit of negativity that may be holding you back. And with your last breath, start to wiggle your fingers or feet. Slowly begin to open your eyes without focusing. Take another deep breath and return to the call in front of you.
Thank you. I feel like a dragon. It was fun. Thanks. That was really nice. And I don't know, it felt like on theme too. I'm not sure how, but it really did. Thank you. Needed that. Okay. So we have a ton of really juicy material that we watched for today. And then we also have some really juicy poses to look at, finally getting back down on the ground, looking at some seated postures. Our other student teacher is Lisa, correct? So maybe let's have you guys do your takeaways and then we can go over the material and then we can switch to looking at poses. So is Lisa here? Yes, no, maybe? I'm not sure. Or maybe she switched with someone? If she is, I'll give her a minute. Let us know, unmute or tell us. Otherwise, Katie, do you want to give us your takeaways from everything? I'll unmute you. Whoops. There you go.
Got it. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So the first takeaway I had was about like the monkey brain, and seeing the comments in the Facebook group and what you've referenced in the video about not being alone in all of the anxious feelings, which was really great. The reciprocal inhibited breathing pattern. I did all of the breathing modules before this and thought that I had been breathing wrong for years because of ballet or from like stuffing my stomach in from self-body issues or like body image issues, and then to hear that it's actually that stress response, and for you guys to explain it so clearly exactly what I was doing wrong when I was breathing was another comforting thing to know, like there's a fix and you're not alone. And then the last part about the orange alert, all of those things are something that I had called the fallout, where when like something stressful would happen, I'd react fine and be that superhuman, and then afterwards there'd be a fallout where everything would still feel bad, even though there wasn't anything else that you could do. There wasn't any more stressors, there wasn't any more action to take, and yeah, it was just really amazing to hear all the science behind everything that been driving me crazy for years.
Cool. Yeah. I know. I really love this material so much because it kind of just explains why we're so stressed out, right? And you're not alone. You're definitely not alone. We all experience this. So let's review the key concepts as sort of hopefully, and also I think there's homework questions that you guys might want to know you have the right answers to. So the first thing is that I think we want to remember is also the title of the video, but worth repeating. Neurons that fire together, wire together. So does that make sense to everyone, or do people have questions about that? It also, it's really cool too, because I think a lot of this information that's presented ties back to a lot of what we studied and looked at with the Yoga Sutras. So when we think about neurons that fire together, wiring together, what does that make people think of when we think back to Patanjali and the studies we did there? And there's no really like right or wrong answer. It could be a bunch of things, but I'm just kind of curious. Yeah, samskaras, vrittis, yeah. So especially with neurons that fire together, wire together, remember how Kristen talked about like the grooves in your mind, kind of like the tire tracks of a cart. And it's really hard to like shift the cart in a new direction once the tires are in that groove. And I think of that a lot with this as well, because it's like if you're constantly having neurons firing together and wiring together that say, I'm not good enough, or I'm not a good teacher, or I stink, or any kind of negative self-talk, as well as a million other things, right? Like I'm not good at X, Y, Z, or maybe you think you're really, like whatever it is, that's really interesting to start to gain a witness mindset around, right? So you can kind of see like, what are those grooves? What are those habitual things that I say to myself? So this is like almost like superficial, right? Like verbal tics we all have. We talked about that in Saturday's call about cueing and how we all have like filler words we use. But on a much deeper level, it's sort of like, what is your psyche sort of ingrained and your inner dialogue telling you on a daily basis? And maybe some of those grooves that are really deep are ones that you might want to start investigating or maybe start changing. So it's really cool to get awareness around that. And then to kind of understand the science behind it as well. And Sibel says it's kind of like the basis of cognitive behavioral therapy. Yeah, it is. So going in a little bit more to the science, what does someone want to define? And I don't know if Lisa's here, so people are going to have to help Katie out because we don't want her to have to like carry us this whole call. What is the autonomic nervous system, if we kind of have to define it? Does someone want to volunteer to tell us? So Amanda says rest and digest. So we're going to get there. That is So Michelle says the involuntary nervous system. Yeah, so let's go with that first. What does that mean? What are some examples of the breathing, says Christian? Yeah. So one way you can think of it, so Sibel says it's the system that takes care of the body without us having to cognitively think about it. Correct. Does that make sense? However, there's an asterisk there. It doesn't require conscious thought, but it can, parts of it can be affected by our external or internal environment. And the internal part also reminds me of the Yoga Sutras, right? So autonomic nervous system, people said heartbeat, blinking, digestion. Yeah, all of these are great. Perfect examples. So Shay just clarified exactly what was the next thing I was going to say. You don't have to think of breathing, but you can control your breathing, right? So if I, luckily leading this call, I don't have to think, Brett, breathe, Brett, breathe, Brett, breathe, right? My body's just going to do that. It's also blinking and doing all sorts of other cool stuff. But we do have elective control. What a great term, Kira. Thank you. We do have elective control over some aspects, right? So if I wanted to slow my breathing down, that's something I could control. In doing that, I'd also slow my heart rate. If I wanted to blink really fast, right, I can do that. So neuroscientist in her other life, perfect. I know we have a lot of really awesome science students in this class. It's very cool. So when I talk about how it can be affected by our external or internal environment, this also reminds me of the Yoga Sutras. So remember when we talked about the snake right at the beginning, like whether you think a snake is in the middle of the road or there really is a snake in the middle of the road, that your mind and your nervous system are going to react the same way. You guys remember that? So that's really interesting here because it's like whether there's actual stress, yeah, perception is reality, remember? Yeah. So whether there's perceived stress or actual stress, your poor nervous system, like it doesn't know the difference, right? Whether the snake is real or imagined. So when we say that the autonomic nervous system can be affected by our external or internal environment, that internal environment is like, what are you thinking? So if you're living in constant panic and you think there's snakes everywhere, right? That's going to affect your nervous system, even if nothing in your external environment is wrong at all. Make sense? Okay, we cool? All right, so let's move on. So within the autonomic nervous system, there's 3 different parts. What are those parts? Let's put them in the chat. Perfect. Enteric, and then the 2, parasympathetic and sympathetic. Yeah, perfect. Now, between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, is like one better than the other? Is one the good guy and one the bad guy? Let's hear someone maybe unmute or riff on this a little bit, because this is really important. And it's one of my favorite parts of all of this material. Loretta says both are useful. Okay, so yin and yang. Okay, cool. So does anyone want to unmute and talk us through this? Anyone? Or maybe our student teacher will fall back on her. Oh, Aisha raised her hand.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Aisha, let's hear from you.
Yeah, okay. Is it working?
Yeah, it is. Sorry. We can all chat also after.
Yeah, so both are useful, but like you were talking about in the video, if you're on orange alert, if you're constantly in the sympathetic nervous system, always on alert, then it leads to negative things. It affects your health, your digestion, high blood pressure, cholesterol, anxiety, insomnia, all of these things. So you need to be able to switch over to the parasympathetic once the situation that requires the fight or flight response is removed. You know, you need to be able to do something regularly, otherwise it begins to affect you in more serious ways. So in a way, the sympathetic might be the more, like, the worst of the 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's not really that one's good and one's bad. That's the key point, and she said it really well. It's that we want to be swinging like a pendulum between the 2 every 1 to 4 hours, right? So this would mean that we wake up and we feel energized and we're productive, and then we rest. And then, later in the day, we go through that same cycle. And at night, when it's time to fall asleep, we don't have problems falling asleep, right? So our body's naturally shifting between these two states. We're productive, we're getting things done. We're also resting, and, doing our housekeeping activities internally. The issue is not with one or the other. The issue is when we get jammed in sympathetic, right? And the pendulum stops swinging between the two. So I really like this idea, because a lot of times people think like, well, yoga is just about relaxation, right? Yoga is just about chilling and activating the parasympathetic nervous system. And yes, we do want to activate the parasympathetic nervous system when we do yoga, but not because that one's better, right? It's because we're trying to help people find a healthy balance between the two, right? And yoga also, we do some things that are stressful, right? Like chair pose, or I don't know, that's definitely my one that feels pretty stressful. So it's also asking, how can we respond to stress, or how can we respond to discomfort in a healthy way? Yeah, that kind of makes sense? Okay, cool. So what the problem is when we're on the drip, just like what Aisha said, when we're marinating in the chemicals of stress hormones. And then Kristen does a really awesome job. If you ever want to rewatch, I think we talked about examples of parasympathetic activity, but let's get really specific on those. Does people want to put them in the chat? What are some examples of parasympathetic nervous system activity? Yes, we need siestas, all of us. Oh, and Lisa's here now, awesome. Digestion, perfect. Yes, housekeeping activities. So menstruation, right? Memory consolidation. It's an important one. Immunity or immune system functions, the reproductive system. Yes, totally. Yes, all of those things. Cool. So when we're marinating in this chemical drip of stress, what happens is that when there's an actual stressful event, we don't respond to it very well. We don't have that superpower strength that the sympathetic nervous system is really designed to give us, right? We want to have these bursts of like productivity, energy, but instead we're kind of just like constantly a little bit there. And then it can also cause us to have an overblown response to a small stimuli, which I think we've all been there, right? It's like one little thing happens on top of a bad day or on top of a series of stressful things, and it's just like a breaking point. You lose your temper, or there's just, yeah. And Ali says, as a PTSD person, living in orange alert is no fun. Yeah. So whether you have PTSD, or maybe you don't really know how to unwind that well, right? Just normal life is really stressful. We're in a age, modern times, that, never really been experienced before, where like our phones are dinging at us all the time. There's really no rest from like social media, the internet. Like so much has changed from, even when I was a child, that makes life just inherently more stressful. So this is, I think, another reason why yoga has skyrocketed in popularity, right, over this same time period. I don't think it's a coincidence, because we really need these tools more than we ever did before. Okay, so definitely make sure to review the really awesome video where Kristen talks about what happens when a tiger is coming at us, right? So what are all those things that are happening when you're in sympathetic nervous system, or when you're in sort of the stress response? So let's name some of them. Heart rate goes up. Yes. What else? There's so many things. It's really cool. Pupils dilate. That's another great one. Your breathing. So let's get specific on the breathing. What happens with the breathing? Because I want to get really specific here. So your breathing gets faster, but it's shallow, says Michelle, right? So you start breathing, you actually start taking in a lot of air, but in the reciprocal inhibited breathing pattern that we don't want, right? So meaning when you inhale, your belly would move in, and when you exhale, your belly would move out. Just try that right now. It really doesn't feel good. It's like someone standing under your diaphragm. Okay, your clotting factors increase, glucose floods the system. Yep, all of these are perfect. Your muscles tense, just overall, as if you were preparing to run away. So just like general tension and muscle tightness. Cortisol in the bloodstream, I think you guys mentioned, and adrenaline. Yes, that was the other big one I was looking for. Adrenaline floods the system. I think that's a lot of it. We talked about reciprocal inhibited breathing. Oh, and then when the tiger is gone, you have that oxytocin cuddle hormone, which I think is really fun. So that's really a great video to review because there's so much. It's really amazing when I focus on this material. It's like, it's amazing how much your body is trying to work for you, right? And we'll see this in the myofascial release material that's coming up as well. But your body just wants to support you. So if you're telling your body, I'm stressed out, I'm, you know, there's imaginary snakes, real or imagined, all around me, and you're just like, you have this internal kind of mindset of stress, your body is just trying to protect you. It's trying to do what it thinks you want it to do to stay safe, meaning that, you know, it's getting ready to clot as if you were going to be attacked, right? It's just so amazing. It's like your body's like, you might get attacked soon, so I'm going to, you know, do all these incredible things to try to protect you. And Lisa says, I really identified with these videos because you become what you imagine. Yes. Cool. And Lisa, you're here now. So do you want to give us your takeaways? And then we can look at poses, and then we can also, I mean, if people have things they want to share on this material, I would love to hear from folks. Okay, hi.
Hello.
Yay, Lisa's here. Hi.
I'm in my son's room, so I found a quiet spot. When I had to listen to these videos again, because it resonated so much with me, and I was like, oh, that's the reason why. Okay. When I've been under stress, when I was married to my boy's dad, constant stress all day long, constant tapping. So I definitely was marinating in it, and it affected me not only emotionally, but also physically as well. I thought I was having a heart attack, but it ended up being GERD. I went to the ER, you know, thinking I was having a heart attack. They said no, you know, it was a panic attack and GERD, but it really felt like it. And then I also had a lot of digestive problems. And then also here just recently, I switched school so I could be closer to both my boys. And I went from middle school special ed to elementary special ed. And even though I had been with elementary kids, you know, most of my 24 years of teaching, I had forgotten how much energy they have. And also I have two paras, and I have one para that works really well. We get along. She does a lot of things. I don't even have to ask her. She already does it. And I have another one who is not quite so nice. I find out from other people that she's been talking behind my back, and I'm like, I just got here, and you know, I'm not the previous teacher, so I've been having some digestive issues. I actually had to go to the ER last week. They couldn't find anything, and I'm like, then why am I in so much pain? And then when I listened to these videos, I was like, okay. Now I understand why. And I was letting all these outside forces affect me internally, and I have changed my diet completely. It's been almost 2 years. I take a prebiotic and a probiotic because I fully believe in gut health. I was just shocked. You know, I was like, wait a minute, I'm eating healthy. I'm taking, you know, my vitamins. I'm taking a prebiotic and a probiotic. Why, you know? But it's because I was not releasing that stress. I was not getting out and exercising more. I was not meditating. It's hard for me to sit still in meditating because that monkey mind, Vitra, keeps going.
Yeah.
Keeps thinking.
Yeah, so, no, I'm so glad you're sharing this, and like people in the chat are saying that they can relate to what you're saying. It's really interesting because when you think of so many of the chronic health problems that we have in society, yes, right? It's like ABS, yes. I'm sorry, not IBS, right? Irritable bowel syndrome, which basically right. is this. It's like what we're talking about. And when we get, it's really cool because we're gonna see both the restorative yoga material, restorative yoga lectures coming up, and the myofascial release. And both of those talk about this a lot more, like go much, much deeper into the importance of relaxation, and also why so many modern chronic issues are difficult to diagnose, right? Like fibromyalgia, for example, is another one.
And people tell you it's all in your head, and you're like, no, I'm serious. I'm really hurting right here, and they want to give you medication to kind of put a Band-Aid over, but they don't want to go to the root cause of it. And I found a lot of other women around my age, mid to late 40s, also are going through a lot of this.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm excited, because then now, I can take what I'm learning here and transfer it.
Yeah. And one question I think people have a lot, because you mentioned this too, in terms of like a colleague or something like that. I think a lot of times people have asked me in the past, or I get this question, at least I know in the Uplifted group a lot. It's like, well, what do you do if you are forced to be around someone who's a stressful person? Has anyone wondered about that? What do you do if you are like, you're just in a situation or there's someone that you can't get away from, probably you're related to them, and how do you handle that? And we can brainstorm solutions on this call, but the real answer, the answer I'm going to offer up to all of you, is that you have to retrain, right? Remember, neurons that fire together wire together. You have to retrain your own cognitive response so that whatever they're doing that stresses you out, or their innately stressful behavior, it doesn't affect you so deeply. And it's much easier said than done, but it's like a practice, just like your yoga asana is a practice and meditation is a practice. Practicing that new response, right? Carving that new neural pathway in the brain is a practice. Yeah. And it is so hard to do, right? And if you can avoid someone or something, sometimes that works too, but a lot of times we can't, right? So, all right. So, Jamie wants to share. Let's hear from someone else. Go ahead, Jamie.
Just that point about aversion or avoiding, like I can really speak to that with sobriety. And I've gone through a situation with having to, I thought avoiding would help. And I think when you're talking about avoiding parents, my triggers, one of them, but really having to dive inward to discover what those things are. And when I'm reading the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, it's super interesting to me about how they fold in. And when you're talking about retraining, putting boundaries up is super helpful. And I experienced that with my family, even just recently with, I hadn't seen them. I had a super embarrassing incident in May, and I ended up avoiding and didn't realize how much I was avoiding. I thought, I'm just putting some distance, and it wasn't that. And I was trying to just kind of shirk away, kind of hide. I put myself back into a situation where I needed it into having dinner with them and having this moment of being able to set boundaries. And then it's like, okay, and so setting that boundary was part of the behavioral change to me, like knowing what you can tolerate. And then it's okay to like step away when you can sense that there's a stress kind of to start happening. I don't know. I just felt like that really resonated and made sense. And then how to breathe through it and how to choose to separate and then like regroup and then like creating a calm in it. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Has anyone here heard of shadow work or know about that concept or idea? little bit,
No.
maybe, yes. Yeah. So we won't go too much into it now because we should look at poses, but and there's a Savannah podcast on it if you guys want to check it out with Cassandra, who we're going to see soon in training. So I'll link it. But it's basically like if something is triggering you or someone is triggering you, right? That's like reflecting or shining a light on a part of yourself where you don't have sort of resolution yet, right? So a really simple example could be, say the affirmation, money is flowing towards me, something like that. If that affirmation feels like a little off or triggers you in some way, it's kind of pointing for you and shining the light that like, oh, there's something about money that is, or something about this concept that you haven't really made peace with, right? There's like a shadow there, if that makes sense, right? Of something that you need to investigate a little deeper, something that's unresolved for you, basically. So whether it's with family or parents, like someone earlier put in the chat how a path with heart would talk about how you see every obstacle as a teacher. That's the same as like shadow work to me. It's the same concept, right? Like pretty much every self-help thing that's ever been invented is just all different analogies and riffs on this same core theme, right? That we see in these ancient texts as well, right? Which is that if a parent or someone is upsetting you, that's shining the light on where you have some inner work to do. Does that make sense? And that's like what the yoga practice overall is really teaching us. Now, when I say avoid, like if someone is a toxic person, because sometimes there's just people who are toxic, who are verbally abusive to you, who are physically abusive, right? That's where I'm saying let's avoid, right? Avoid. But if it's not that extreme, get curious, right? Does anyone notice they hang out with their parents and even though they're an adult, they start acting like a teenager again, right? Me, right? All of a sudden it's just like there's just these behavior path like stuff that's so ingrained, that's so subconscious that you kind of regress to fall into those grooves, those neural grooves, your way of associating with your parent, right? Just because it's so ingrained. And then the yoga practice and the meditation practice and, you know, this training and all this knowledge and this work helps you gain this like witness, this consciousness around that. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's a choice. I could behave differently here. There's an opportunity for a breakthrough, a new way of relating. Okay, cool. All right. Let's shift gears to looking at poses, but you guys can definitely, we can talk about this more and we can talk about it more in Jetta's. And on theme, the poses that I chose to kind of like sequence or structure with this material are some really nice seated poses that would be great for helping people really breathe deeply and sort of swing the pendulum into parasympathetic, right? Do you agree? We have Paschimottanasana, Baddha and Jathara Parivartanasana, which is the supine twist, which is oh so juicy. Yeah. So maybe Katie can talk us through some folks she wanted to look at in these ones, and we can go over some of the alignment of these poses. And then of course I'll make videos on them for you guys as well. So, and if people have questions also like from the sequencing video and module that we covered on Saturday, please feel free to also put those types of questions in the chat. Okay, so let's look at, and Katie, do you want to unmute? Did you pick some folks to look at?
Yeah.
Where do you want to start?
We can start with the one that you have open.
Okay,
Baddha
Konasana. Baddha Konasana, yeah.
Megan K.
Okay.
It's really hard with these ones because everyone's like mostly relaxed while they're doing it. But I think the one thing I would say for this pose is just to be careful about pulling the feet up.
Mm-hmm. Pulling the feet apart, you mean?
Yeah, and like pointing the toes towards your face. Like I feel like.
Oh, you think she's maybe pulling the feet towards her face? I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Like instead of twisting the ankles, like keeping the legs completely straight and just trying to bend from the back and hips without putting any strength in your arms.
Right. Okay. So your word, she's pulling the feet towards the face like that. And yeah, I agree. We don't want students to pull the feet towards the face and kind of do funky stuff in the ankle joint. Yeah, I agree. Did you have anyone else in here you wanted to look at? Otherwise I can.
Yeah, not in that one.
Okay, cool. So with this pose, there's so many different variations, right? So I think a couple people are showing like the forearms underneath the shins, which is so relaxing. The biggest thing for these seated postures, and oh my gosh, head on a block, right? Yes, 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 yes. Feels so nice. How close people's heels are to their groin is what's going to make this pose either more active or more passive, if that makes sense. So it's like we can see with Rosa, she's kind of doing an active variation, right? She has her heels as close into her groin as she can, and she's up nice and tall, and that's great. That's very different than what Muriel's doing, right? She has her heels much farther away, so she's sort of in this wide diamond shape, and she's totally relaxing and coming into deep flexion. So the biggest thing I think that I want to kind of call out with this posture, which most people, because we're so talented YTTers, a lot of folks have, well, maybe Philippe's probably the best example we're going to get. He doesn't really need a block or a blanket, but remember to look for a lot of folks when they sit on the ground, they're going to have that posterior pelvic tilt. You guys remember that? And he doesn't. He's just like the closest example I can find in the folder right now. Where even for him, like just having a folded blanket, right? Just even the lowest height under the sits bones might help get him into more of an anterior pelvic tilt. Does that make sense? Let's look at this with Paschimottanasana, actually. And what do we think about this pose as like a beginner-friendly pose, Baddha? What do we say, yay or nay for our beginners? Baddha. Randeep says yay. Michelle says yay. Yeah, I agree. I say yay, right? This, as long as you make sure to bring people props who need it, I think this is one of the forward folds where people tend not to be so competitive, right? Like Paschimottanasana, which we'll look at right now, people get really competitive because they want to touch their feet and they want to go deeper than the person next to them. But Baddha somehow, I find people don't have the same, I don't know, competitiveness with it. And it's accessible for most bodies, especially when you consider that the heels can really be far apart from the body. And sorry to go back here for a minute too, you can put blocks under people's knees, right? So if we wanted to make this even more restorative, we could put blocks under her knees here, right? And Michelle said, I actually found it harder to fold forward with my shins further away. Michelle, probably you felt a deeper hip stretch is what I'm guessing. By harder, do you mean you felt a deeper hip stretch? Yes, yes. So when we have the heels close into the body, right, it becomes a little bit more of an inner groin stretch. Does that make sense to folks? Like an inner thigh stretch when we have the heels close. When we take the heels farther away and then we fold, it's getting more into the outer hips. Make sense? And if you fold forward with the heels close, you feel it in the hips too. But again, we have our yin module coming up, so we'll go a lot more deeper into this. But if you take them into that, you know, more restorative or yin-like version, and you stay there a while, yeah, you're really going to feel it in the hips. And yes, you're supposed to feel it there. Shay says also, I like a rolled up blanket across the ankles and under the knees. Can you do that with just one blanket, Shay, or do you need like multiple blankets? I'm curious. Tell me in the chat, because I'm curious what you're.
Sorry, I'll unmute because I
Oh, yeah.
hard typing. But so it's like I take a regular yoga blanket, and then when it's like half, folded, like how it usually is when you get there, and you can roll it. So it's like kind of a long, slender, and then like tube, and then you can put it over your ankles, and then put the sides under your knees. So it's like one piece.
Got it. So it would kind of
like
be
a
like,
U-shape. Yeah.
Yeah. So it would be, I'm going to try to draw it. So it would be like here, and then going up into here, and then also on the other side, like this.
I can't see your screen right now, but
Oh
yeah, yes, exactly. Yes, I see it now,
yeah,
like that.
okay, cool. Yeah. Ooh, I like that. That's great. Cool. Whoops. Whoa. Someone else said something in the chat that I want to look at, but hold on. Driving issues. Stop annotation. Okay, here we go. Just want to see. Okay, demo. Okay, so yeah, and maybe you'll post a picture of that for us, Shay, if you don't mind, like in the Facebook group just later, because I think.
Yeah, I actually haven't. I'm going to upload my pose tonight, so I'll do
perfect.
it.
Okay, yeah, put it in the group too and call it out.
Oh yeah, good idea.
Yeah, just in the Facebook group, because I think people would love to see it. Okay, so sort of just like we talked about how with Baddha Konasana, if you have the heels closer to the groin, it becomes a little bit more of an inner groin stretch, still a stretch for the outer hips. But if you take the heels farther away, it becomes much more about the outer hips. So similar with Paschimottanasana, if you do Paschimottanasana with the knees bent, so kind of like Ellen's doing, where's the stretch, do you guys think? Or where do you feel it in your body when you do it with the knees bent? Low back, yeah, it becomes a really juicy low back stretch that feels phenomenal. When you do it with the legs straight, look at Katie just because she's here, where's the stretch primarily? Hamstrings, right? So just different focus, right? So one thing you can do when you teach this pose is you can let people know that they can choose what to focus on, right? So if people can't touch their feet, you can tell them, or even if they can, you can give them the option to keep the knees bent, also like Jamie's showing here, and to make it more about a low back stretch instead. Katie and or Lisa, did you have someone you wanted to look at in this folder? In terms of Paschimottanasana and teaching cues and what you'd be looking for in your students?
I had written down Kathleen G.
Okay, let's look at her. So if she's a student in your class, what are you thinking or wanting to say to her?
I would say to, like, if she bent her knees more and moved her hands further down her feet, then maybe she'd be able to, like, relax her shoulders and neck. Because it's hard to tell in the picture, but it looks right now like she's pulling and, like, using the force of her arms. And it might be more comfortable in a better pose if she just bent her knees slightly and was able to, like, relax down into the stretch.
Yeah, and it would be nice if her head was in line with the rest of her spine, right? She's not taking extreme cervical extension or anything like that, but we can see there's sort of a break in the line of energy there. Yeah, so she could dip her chin a little bit. You said it feels like her arms are pulling her into the pose. What body part do we want to be propelling us forward into Paschimottanasana? Because Katie was just saying she doesn't want to pull with the arms. So what is it that's moving the upper body towards the thighs and towards the feet? Hips, chest, abs. That's what I'm looking for, right? Unfortunately. So again, this is something that you have to educate your students on, because they're going to say, oh, we're at the relaxing part of class. We're sitting on the ground now, which means I get to just turn off all my muscles and relax. Now, if you're doing yin or restorative at the end of your class, thumbs up, that's the case. But if you're teaching a traditional hatha or vinyasa sequence, actually, even in these seated postures, the abdominals are working and your whole all the muscles are still hugging into the midline and really active. So one of the common misalignments that you'll see here is people like not flexing their feet, right? Lisa says she wants to look at Ashley T. Okay, let's look at her. So a lot of times you see dead legs, right? Which again, if they're doing the yin version, no big deal. But if it's not the yin version, we want the legs to be active and the feet to be really actively flexed. So what did you want to tell if Ashley was your student, Lisa? What are you looking at for her?
it looks like her upper back looks kind of strained. So I would almost suggest like a block to kind of help release it. She looks kind of bent up, kind of too much up in here. So maybe a block would kind of help her.
Where do you want to put the block?
Actually, probably in between where her head is and where her knees are.
Okay, you want to give her a block right here for her head.
Yes.
Okay. So
to try it there and see if that helps alleviate it, and then maybe even have her even bend her knees. It just looks like that to me. It kind of reminds me of me when I'm kind of bent over, and because I know that's where a lot of my stress goes, is up in here, and it looks like that would exacerbate any type of upper shoulder, any type of shoulder stress or pain.
Yeah, so I want to dive into something here, which is, I'm glad you brought this up, because just like we're going to see as we go forward into the yin and myofascial release stuff as well. For Paschimottanasana, there's active, right, and the passive version of the pose, right? So if she was doing the yin style of the pose, meaning that she's just going to hang, basically. And this is actually a really cool stretch for the myofascial backline of the body, which we're going to talk about in a future module coming up. Hold on, let me share with you guys again. I unshared, sorry for that. Hold on. So she's doing the yin style version of the pose. I don't know if she intends to, but that she is. So this is a really great stretch for the myofascial backline of the body, which we're going to learn about in the fascia module coming up soon. But if she were really doing the yin style, would want her feet to like not be flexed. We'd want everything to be relaxed. So what I think is confusing is she's kind of in the upper body, she's yin style, totally relaxed. But in the lower body, it looks like she's doing Paschimottanasana, right? Because her legs are engaged and her feet are flexed. This is another common misalignment you're going to see with your students in Paschimottanasana that Ashley just happens to be doing. So we'll talk about it here. But is she flexing back equally with all 10 toes? What do we think? No, she's favoring the big toe side. So a really great cue you can say here is flex back with equally through the big toe and pinky toe side of the foot, right? Because if she flexes more through the pinky toe side of the foot, she's going to get a more balanced action at the ankle joint. Yeah. So if she's doing the yin style version, we just want her feet to relax and her legs to just relax, because everything's supposed to be relaxed. If she's doing Paschimottanasana, would want her to flex equally through both sides of each foot, and would probably want to take her out of this deep flexion, right? Would probably want her to find length in the spine and maybe have a strap. Remember, a strap is your best friend when you're teaching the active version of this pose. So let's talk about, for today's call, let's talk about the active version of Paschimottanasana, right? The traditional Hatha Vinyasa version of the pose, okay? Because later in the yin module, we can talk about the yin version, okay? So if we're doing this pose actively, we want to root the sits bones into the mat, and then we want to press the thigh bones down, right, actively, and we want to flex the feet actively back towards the face, right? So the legs are really, really strong. It's almost like Tadasana legs in Paschimottanasana. And then you find length in the spine, right? So you inhale, you get long and tall, and then you pull your abdominals back in space to take you into the fold. And it's interesting because we don't have a lot of folks here using a strap, but a strap is so awesome in this pose. Why? Why are we so into a strap? Do we have anyone with a strap? What does the strap allow for? That's a key uplifted yoga alignment principle. Katie, keep your back straight, lengthen the spine. Thank you, right? Does that make sense to everyone? Right? If you have a strap, you can inhale, get tall first, and then exhale, fold, right? It really allows the student to find length, because if they're going to touch their toes, they start hunching over and rounding, and then we have thoracic flexion. Make sense? So this pose is like you're running and giving straps to everyone, if you have straps available. If you know you don't have straps available, well, maybe you want to teach the version with the knees bent, or maybe you want to teach a different pose, or maybe you want to really encourage people to hold on the shins or hold the kneecaps, or to even take their hands on either side of the thighs, right? And inhale, find length, exhale, fold. So remember when we talked about all the standing poses, which are forward fold? What's the golden rule there in terms of if it's okay for a student's spine to come into flexion? Can anyone remember for like Uttanasana and Prasarita? What are we kind of looking for? If we see someone's really rounded in those poses, how do we know if that's okay or not okay? Anyone remember? It's the same thing that I've kind of been harping on here. So the rule, or the rule I'm suggesting, is that if your student can find length in the spine before they come into flexion, then it's okay for them to be in flexion. You guys remember that now? Is it jogging a memory? Yeah. So if your student's in Uttanasana, right, like this, kind of holding the elbows, swaying side in, relaxing, but you know, either you saw them earlier in class, or you know that they have the ability to do this, right? Then it's okay, right? So we like flexion when it's someone who's choosing to come into flexion. Length before flexion, right? But if it's a student who they haven't come into that length ever, or their just default is rounded, like they're in flexion unconsciously, does that make sense? Which is a lot of people, right? Then you want to make sure that you help them find length, so before they round. And there's never, I can't think of a more perfect example than Paschimottanasana for this, right? So if you see your student, you say Paschimottanasana, and you see them go like this, right? Can you guys see me? That's where you have to tell them, come on out of it. All right, inhale, get tall first. Exhale, pull your abs back in space. Inhale, get tall again, keeping your spine long, fold forward, hinge from the hips, fold forward, hold the outer thighs or shins. The goal is not to touch the toes, right? Just feel stretch in the back of the legs. And then as you breathe out, allow yourself to gently round. Something like that, right? That was kind of wordy, but you get the idea, right? So your goal is to make everyone find length before they come into flexion. Does that make sense? And there's teaching cues for this in the manual. And then another thing that I like to say is press your thighs into the ground, press your femur, right? That's the bone of your thigh into the ground. Flex back through the big toe and pinky toe side of your foot. So you really get people to engage their legs, right? Because if the legs aren't engaged, we don't really have, that's our foundation, right? We don't have, right? So most people, again, are like, oh, I'm sitting on the seated portion of class. Awesome. I finally get to just chill and let my legs be like spaghetti. No. Right? So that's where you're going to bring them a strap so they can find that length. And we want to keep the shoulder blades on the back, right? Because the scapula in this pose, where are they going to go? It wants to reach, right? And people are just going to nosedive. So all your cueing is going to be about helping them find that length first in the active version of the pose. Does that make sense? We'll talk about yin and the restorative version later. Okay, and then even the most advanced student is probably like we saw with, sorry, I'm blanking on the name right now, but even the most advanced student is gonna flex back more through the big toe or pinky toe side. So that's a wonderful cue that you can challenge even your advanced folks with. Even your advanced folks, well, I'm just gonna look back at this picture, can usually press their thigh bone, their femur even into the ground more, right? So she needs to flex through the whole foot, right? She's just pulling the big toe, so she needs to flex back through the pinky toe, and she needs to press her femur down into the ground. She's flexible, I think, right? She can do it. So she's missing this action of the femur rooting down, right? And when she does that, she's gonna find even more power out the heel. And then the sickling that's happening at the ankle joint will stop happening. And she'll also think of taking the pinky toes towards her face. So maybe she wants to hold the outside of the foot instead of the big toe. Make sense? Okay, stop me if people have questions. The other thing that is essential is to, before, you know, you run and give everyone straps, you need to make sure everyone has a neutral or ideally anterior pelvic tilt before they come into this, right? So you're gonna have to prop people up. There was a really cool photo of someone propped here. Where can I find it? Because if someone's already in a posterior pelvic tilt, there's not a ton of, here, let's look at, Kristen's on the call, so she's not gonna mind if we look at her. Okay, what's going on with Kristen's pelvis? Posterior, neutral, or anterior? What do we think? Posterior, right? Posterior. Yeah, and Jen's saying we don't want locked knees, right? So just like when you cue engaging through the legs in the standing poses, you need to make sure your hyperextenders don't overdo it. Yeah, so she just needs to sit up on, I mean, I think this is her dog's little bed, but honestly, it would be perfect for her. And would she want to sit on the bed? If we say we're going to use the doggy bed as a prop, just for, in this hypothetical story. Okay, perfect. You guys caught me. She wants to sit on the edge of the bed, right? Because of being on the edge, it's going to tip her sitting bones forward and help her find that neutral, moving towards the anterior pelvic tilt. If she just sits on the blanket or on the dog bed, it's not going to do anything. Okay, cool. All right, let's really quickly look at the twist, which is so juicy. And I'm curious how many people were taught to sort of set the hips the way the Uplifted Manual and I teach it, and how many people was that completely new for? So put new in the chat if that was totally new for you, and put, I don't know. Do people know what I'm talking about when I say set the hips? So, okay, so we want a reminder. So let's look at some bodies. So yeah, so before we jump in, so when you look at the manual or when you go back and review, what you'll see is that to come into the supine twist, what I'm suggesting is that you say, people put the soles of the feet on the ground, right? So would have the knees towards the ceiling and the soles of the feet on the ground, and then to lift your hips and take them 2 or 3 inches to the left before we drop the knees and twist right. And then we come back to center, and then to go the other way, lift the hips, take them 2 or 3 inches to the right, and let the knees drop left. Had people heard of that before? Yes or no? So Katie said it's new to me. We're saying some people have been doing it for a while. Okay, so why do we think we want to do this? Isabel says she instinctively did it. Interesting. What's the deal? What do you guys think? To keep the alignment of the spine, says Isabel. Yes, yes, yes. So this is a fun game. This is where I get to, it's a game show. Okay, now it's a game show. So we're gonna play the game show of, I wish we had buzzers, of who did this and who didn't, right? And again, this isn't like a right or wrong, it's just we're trying to practice reading bodies. That's why we're doing this, right? Okay, so this is awesome because we have an aerial shot from Chloe. This is awesome, like looks great. She has the cactus arms, super good. But do we think that she did the setting the pelvis, yes or no? When I say set the pelvis, I mean move the hips 2 inches before she dropped the knees. No, says Renee. No. Yes, she didn't, right? Because if she did, her hips and low back would be like here. You know what I'm saying? And actually the twist would be just as deep, if not deeper, right? Should just be keeping all the segments of the spine in one line. Let's look at someone else. Game show, get your buzzers. Okay. Let's look at, well, we already looked at Ashley today, but she'll forgive us if we look at her twice. What do we think? Yes or no? Did she set the pelvis? Say yes. Did she not? Say no. Yes, right? Do you see what a big difference? Huge difference. Okay, let's do 1 or 2 more, because is this fun? It's like game show. Okay. Having way too much fun. Let's look at Muriel. Yes or no? What do we think? Yes, I think she did. I think she did. I think the double leg cross is a lot for her, but I think she did. Maybe she could do it a little bit more, or maybe she didn't. I don't know. I wish she was on this call. Maybe she could tell us. Jamie says she cannot tell. So the big way is you have to kind of get an aerial view of the person. Like Tessa, did she do it? Yes or no? Sorry, Muriel was a hard one, you guys. She needs to enlighten us. I hope she'll tell us in the Facebook group. This was a definite no, right? And Jamie, or anyone who's confused, you can tell because if she had moved the hip, so think about it, if she had scooched her booty a couple inches to the right before dropping the knees to the left, her booty would be like over here, her cute booty. Forgive us, Tessa. Yeah, does that make sense? But instead she just came right into the twist, which is why the spine is sort of like that. So again, you get to go out there and teach and make up your own mind about whether you want to tell people to do this or not. But I love it, and I'm going to encourage you to do it. And again, you're only going to teach from your own direct experience. So if this is all news to you, try it both ways, right? Try it both ways in your own body and see what you think feels best. So this is a really cool photo because a lot of people need this, right? If they're not double wrapping the legs, they need a blanket between the knees. Feels so, so good. So you guys can also play with this at home and try it. A lot of people have questions about this pose, like, is it okay if no one's really doing this, but sometimes people think they're doing it wrong if their shoulder leaves the ground. So again, there's a lot of different schools of thought about this. And sorry, before I go into that, here you can see Jackie, she's doing a different twist. I call this like cat stretch, or she's just taking one leg across, which is fine. So there's a lot of different twists you can do. And then there's so many different energetic differences, like palm down as opposed to palm face up, right? Hand on the thigh. I'd rather her hand around the thigh, or knee, sure. As opposed to the hand being out wide, right? So there's like, it's a simple pose, but there's so many different variations, right? Like you can take the legs and, wrap one over the other like we saw here, right? Or you can just let them drop to the side like we see with Abigail, right? And the skull post arms. So sorry, going back, some people I think have the question, well, no one's asked it, but if I were you, I would have the question, is it okay if the student's shoulder leaves the ground, right? When they're twisting. And a lot of people are taught shoulders down. I personally think that, the goal is to feel this really juicy stretch in the whole spine. And if the shoulder comes off the ground, I think it's okay, because I think what the student ends up feeling is a really juicy, yummy stretch if you have them in goalpost arms, or reaching the arm towards the upper right corner for her of the room. They'll get to feel some really juicy stretches in here, right? So again, personal choice, but rather than police everyone's shoulder be on the ground, I just make sure that if someone's shoulder is not on the ground, I encourage them to extend the arm this way, right? Extend the arm towards the corner of the room or come into a goalpost, because there's actually some really yummy opening that can happen here. Okay, and great question from Aida about the gaze and the neck. So again, traditionally, a lot of people would say what? That you should look where? What have people heard in class? That you should look the opposite way of the twist. I don't know. Does that feel good on your guys' neck? It doesn't for me. So again, if it feels good for you, that's something that you could cue, but I would encourage you to cue, look wherever is comfortable for you, right? So that could be the same direction as the legs. It could be just up towards the sky. It could be the opposite. So yeah, and someone else is saying it depends on the day. So I would just say, give your students options here. Look wherever is comfortable for you. Yeah, because this pose is supposed to be relaxing, right? This actually is one where we're now on the ground and everything gets to relax, but we just want to set the hips before we do it. And then a really important note here is that so you have them take the soles of the feet to the ground, take the hips to the left, and you can always remember, you just take the hips in the opposite direction, you're going to tell them to twist, right? So lift the hips, take them to the right, knees drop, Sorry. Take the hips 2 inches to the left, knees drop right. Then you're gonna have them come back to center. Take the hips 2 inches to the right, knees drop left. And then you have to remember that when they come back after that second side, that you tell them to press the tops of the feet into the floor and to set the pelvis back in neutral, right? Because sometimes people forget that. And then you go on to do, I don't know, stuff with the strap or happy baby or other things, and you didn't set them back to center. That makes sense? So that's just like a little teacher trick you gotta just remember to make sure you come back to center. Okay. And do we cover drishtis? So we have been covering drishtis, but I'm not like a policer of drishtis, because I think drishtis are great for when you're balancing, meaning you look at a single point of focus, right? So I like that. But I don't like policing where people have to have their head and neck, you know, and pose. Like if you want to get really fancy on drishti, I mean, they're if you look at light on yoga or Iyengar, like he's saying in triangle pose, you have to be looking up, right? Or in the pose we just looked at, the supine twist, you have to be looking the opposite way. But I don't know, from what I've seen of the anatomy and people's delicate cervical vertebra, and just how much neck tension people have and disc issues, like I don't really want to tell people that they have to look up in triangle pose if it feels more easeful for them to look down. All I care about is that the cervical spine is in neutral and long, right? So my priority is about a long neck that's in neutral, right? That has length in the spine, right? Summary of all alignment, rather than the eyes having to look in a particular place. Does that make sense? So if I don't talk a lot about drishti, that's why, because that's, from my perspective, the safer approach, right? Have people look where it's comfortable for them, and then tell them to dip the chin, make sure the back of the neck is long, so that they're not doing further damage to whatever cervical damage they might already have. Because most of us have text neck syndrome, like all sorts of stuff going on. Most of us have extreme upper back and shoulder tension. So we don't want to contribute to that. Okay, yes, and then if you have a teacher who's being a stickler about it, you can do what Sibel said and act like a rebel and look the other way, and you can feel very cool and rebellious. Okay, let's do, Lisa, I know you're kind of like putting your kids to bed or something. Can you do your closing, or can you not? If you can't, that's totally fine. I just want to make sure I give you the option to do it if you want to. She says she can. Okay, so let's do the closing meditation, and then I'm going to split you up into groups, and we'll come back just for the last 5 minutes to answer questions. And I'll go over the groups in a second. So let's first wind down after all this excitement, so much alignment, game show. We need to wind down. Go ahead.
I took this from my Reiki masterclass. I really like the meditations that we do in there. Go ahead, take a big deep breath in. Hold for 2. And release all your worries, all your cares, at least for this moment right here. Imagine it to be a beautiful day, warm and sunny. Imagine walking through a beautiful forest. As you breathe into yourself, you breathe in the life energy of the forest, and with each step you take, you feel the energy of the earth flowing up through the bottoms of your feet. As you walk along, you notice a path going off to the left and feel compelled to follow the path. It begins to go up a hill, which you easily begin climbing. You are filled with energy and enthusiasm as you continue up through the trees. As you reach the top of the hill, you come up to a plateau and slowly walk out to the edge of the forest. As you stand at the edge of the forest, before you is a beautiful valley. It is filled with plants and flowers and trees and bushes filled with life. And at the far end of the valley, there is a waterfall. There is a path leading along the edge of the valley, and you decide to follow it. As you walk along, up ahead you see a very large boulder covered with moss. And in front of the boulder, there's some soft grass. You feel compelled to go over and sit on the grass and lean against the boulder. As you sit relaxing and gazing into the valley, at the far end of the valley, the clouds part slightly and a beautiful beam of light shines down into the valley. As you watch the beam of light shining on the vegetation in the valley, the clouds shift and the beam of light begins moving slowly through the valley. And as you watch it, you can tell that this is no ordinary beam of light, but it's coming from the third heaven. And as it shines on the plants, they become more alive and seem to be filled with joy and vitality. The light shines on the tree that has withered and is not healthy, but as soon as the light shines on it, it is healed and filled with life. The beam of light shines on the pool of water under the waterfall, and the fish begin jumping up into the light, playing and filled with joy. And as it shines on the waterfall, beautiful rainbow colors of light begin shimmering around the waterfall. The clouds continue to move, and the beam of light comes across the valley towards you, then moves up the side and is now shining right on you, and even shining right through you. Look into the light and allow it to guide you. Whenever you are guided to do so, and at the pace that is right for you, take a few deep breaths, bring awareness to your eyes, and slowly open your eyes and come back. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you. Oh my gosh, so many of these meditations are such a tease. I'm like, I want to do the 30-minute version of this, not the 3-minute version. That was awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so many great visualizations in there. Very cool. Okay, if you need to, before we go into groups, just one final thing I want to say is that talking about the going back to the samskaras, or the neurons that fire together, wire together, a big bonus tip that all of you can take with you, I love this, is that as long as you are a human, as long as you're in a human body, the negative mind, right, is always going to fire first in any given situation. It's just the nature of being human, right? Because we want to protect ourselves, because we think there's danger. It's just the way it is. So one thing that you can start to bring a lot of awareness to, as you start to integrate this into your life more and more, is to sort of harness the negative mind and notice that if you have, if you're able to notice it, but then choose something else, right? So just know that the negative mind is always the quickest and fastest to respond. It's always the first responder. And it's not anything that you can change. It's always going to be that way as long as you're in a human body, but you can start to pay attention to it less and less, right? You can start to be like, oh yeah, you, instead of being like, that's the truth, right? So that's where the awareness comes in, as Karen just put in the chat. Okay, cool. So drop off if you can't stay for Jethas. Otherwise, do you guys want to do pairs again? And what my thought is if hopefully someone's in a place where you can practice teach. And if you put pairs, if you guys want to do pairs, and put no. Yes, if you want to do pairs, no, if you don't want to do pairs. Hopefully you're in a place like me where you have your mat, in which case you're going to cue. It says on the syllabus, Paschimottanasana to Baddha Konasana to lying down, supine twist. And it's really great if you can stay and do this, because that's basically the entire wind down of a class. You can just do those 3 postures. That's basically your seated section is check mark, done. So do that. And if for whatever reason you and your partner are in a situation where neither of you have a yoga mat, or you can't do that, I would just discuss and reflect on the nervous system material and maybe share a takeaway, or you could even share some neurons that are firing together and wiring together that you are consciously trying to change. Yeah. So you guys pick. I will do partners, and then we'll just come back together to say good night. So take up the opportunity to practice teach, guys, and or to connect with someone else around the material. That's kind of what makes it real. Okay, here we go. So And yes, if you're not staying, please drop off, because it will actually make my life easier. Otherwise, I will not know how many people to do. Okay, let's see what this looks like when I do this. Okay. Okay, Jen, are you cool to stay? She's nodding. Awesome. Okay, let's do it.